I can fly it. They laughed when she said it. 30 officers paused, then burst into laughter. She didn't argue, just stood there, calm, in a weathered leather jacket and worn boots as a Category 5 hurricane closed in. They didn't know her name, not yet, not until the Pentagon confirmed her clearance. That day, she didn't just fly into the storm, she exposed everything they tried to bury. And by the time she landed, no one laughed again. Before we dive in, where are you watching from right now? What's your story? Drop it in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The morning air at Fairview Air Base was thick with humidity, the kind that clung to your skin and warned of a storm coming. Hurricane Leona was building fast off the coast, and tension hung over the base like an invisible net. At 6:45 a.m., a figure stepped through the main gate. She wore scuffed boots, jeans that had seen better days, and a faded leather jacket that didn't match the polished metal around her. Her silver hair was tied back into a low ponytail. No makeup, no ceremony. Security Officer David Brooks barely looked up. Another civilian consultant, probably late, probably lost. Name and purpose, he asked without glancing up from his clipboard. She held out an ID badge with quiet hands. Margaret Hayes, here for a maintenance consult on the C-17 fleet. Her voice was steady, low, like someone used to engine noise and silence, more than small talk. Brooks gave her a visitor badge without much interest. Building 12, straight ahead. You've got 8 hours clearance. Weather's gonna get ugly later. Maggie nodded once. She clipped the badge to her jacket and started walking. Every step measured, every movement unhurried. On paper, she was just another civilian mechanic. But paper didn't tell the whole story. Not about the woman who used to fly test missions no one ever talked about. Not about Thunder 7. The base was buzzing that morning. Crews scrambled to secure aircraft. Command staff moved briskly through the corridors. And somewhere, beneath the routine and the radio chatter, something darker was being buried. Maggie reached the maintenance hangars just as the clouds began to roll in. The giant doors of Hangar Bravo were open wide, revealing the hulking shadow of a C-17 Globemaster III, steel, wingspan, and weight meant to carry tanks, soldiers, even hope when needed. Master Sergeant Carlos Ramirez met her outside, flight suit, sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand, and the face of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "You're the consultant?" he asked, one eyebrow raised. "You don't look like someone who's touched modern avionics." Maggie offered a faint smile. "I've touched a few things." Ramirez didn't laugh. He led her inside without another word. The inspection was supposed to be routine, but Maggie's eyes caught what others didn't. Stress fractures near the landing gear mount, safety wire that was either missing or incorrectly looped, torque seals that had been repainted but not reapplied. She didn't say anything right away, just took quiet notes, the way she'd done for most of her life. Some problems you don't fix with confrontation. You fix them by knowing exactly what you're looking at. "Looks good to me," Ramirez said, gesturing around the aircraft. "Meticulous records. This bird passed full inspection last week." Maggie nodded slowly, but her silence wasn't agreement. It was recognition. She'd seen these shortcuts before, 6 months ago. Her son, Captain Noah Hayes, had gone down in a C-17 just like this one. The official report said mechanical failure, unforeseen, unavoidable. But now she was looking at the same errors, the same signs, and she knew. This wasn't chance. This was culture. That night, in her small government-issued quarters, Maggie sat at the edge of her cot, listening to the wind howl. She reached for the only thing she'd brought that wasn't in her duffel, a voice recorder, old, worn. She pressed play. The sound crackled through the quiet. No visibility. Backup nav is fried. I'm trying to keep her steady. "Mom, don't worry." Then static. Only static. Maggie closed her eyes. Let the silence settle back in. That had been Noah's last transmission. The last time she heard his voice. Back in the hangar the next morning, the storm clouds were lower, heavier. She stood alone beneath the wing of another aircraft, eyes tracing the curvature of the fuselage, fingertips brushing chipped paint. She didn't need to be here for the paycheck. She was here for the truth. A junior airman passed by and glanced her way. He looked at her like she didn't belong. She smiled gently. She'd been underestimated before. Most people only see what they expect to see. And no one expects a woman with gray hair and worn boots to carry decades of flight data in her head. Major Brett Holloway arrived just past 9. Tall, decorated, all confidence and pressed creases. He shook her hand with the kind of grip that says, "I'm humoring you. Appreciate the help. Mrs. Hayes," he said. "But these aren't vintage cargo birds. The C-17's a different beast. Not something you just tinker with." Maggie tilted her head slightly. "I'm not here to tinker." Holloway laughed. "Well, good. We've got a real mission coming if this storm hits. No time for second guesses." She watched him walk away, already speaking into a radio. He didn't ask her opinion, didn't ask what she'd seen, but she was already seeing more than he realized. Not just one broken system, a pattern, one she'd followed across reports and silence and grief, one that led her here. And soon, someone was going to have to listen, because the storm wasn't just in the sky anymore. It was inside the hangars, inside the records, inside the choices that got her son killed. And Maggie Hayes. She hadn't flown her last mission yet. By the time dawn broke over Fairview Air Base, Hurricane Leona had changed everything. The storm had grown stronger overnight, tracking inland faster than any model predicted. At the command center, the tension was no longer about preparation, it was about survival. 60 soldiers and 12 M1 Abrams tanks were stranded at Forward Post Ranger, directly in Leona's path. They had one short runway and less than 2 hours before it would disappear under hurricane-force winds. Any rescue mission now had to launch immediately or not at all. General Monica Denton stood at the center of the Situation Room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the weather monitors. A former transport pilot herself. She knew exactly what it meant to fly into a storm like this. She needed a decision, and she needed it fast. Major Brett Holloway stepped forward with a confidence that almost filled the room. His uniform was pressed, boots shined, ribbons gleaming like answers. "I'll take the mission, ma'am," he said. "Me and my crew, we've got the hours. We can fly it." Denton didn't answer right away. She turned toward him slowly, scanning his face as she asked. "Which aircraft?" "Tail 601, he replied, without hesitation. From the far side of the room, Maggie Hayes stopped moving. Her eyes locked on Holloway like someone hearing the name of a ghost. Tail 601, the same C-17 she'd inspected yesterday. The one with cracked mounts and missing safety seals. She took one step forward, steady but quiet. "That plane isn't safe," she said. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the room like cold steel. Holloway raised an eyebrow. "With respect, ma'am, I think the Air Force can handle its own birds," he said. He smiled slightly, gesturing toward her boots and jacket. "You're here for advice, not command?" Maggie didn't blink. "I can fly it," she said. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, the laughter began. It started with Holloway, a low chuckle, followed by another, and then more. The operations center echoed with the sound of disbelief. "You can fly it?" Holloway asked, still laughing. "This isn't crop dusting in Kansas. It's a C-17 through a hurricane." He looked around, inviting others into the joke, but not everyone joined in. One junior officer near the backlit, Claire Rodriguez, stared at Maggie instead. There was something unsettling about her stillness, something that didn't match the laughter. Maggie reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a worn, laminated card. She walked toward the front, passed it quietly to Sergeant Willis at the console. "Run this," she said. "Clearance Protocol Thunder." Willis frowned, then typed. The screen blinked, and red overlays filled the monitor. "Override required. Thunder Protocol, Pentagon Executive Authority. A hush swept the room like a light being dimmed. People turned toward the console, then toward Maggie. No one spoke. General Denton stepped forward. "Sergeant," she asked. Willis looked pale. "Ma'am, the system's requesting real-time confirmation from the Pentagon," he said. "She's listed under active Thunder clearance. Codename Thunder 7. He looked up, slowly. Colonel Margaret Hayes, retired, command-level test pilot. Denton narrowed her eyes. She studied Maggie, really studied her. Then she nodded once. "Colonel Hayes, what do you recommend?" Maggie didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just stepped toward the central table, pulled up a digital map, and pointed. "Tail 601 is grounded, unsafe for flight. I recommend tail number 445. Holloway's voice broke the silence, this time brittle, defensive. "445 isn't on rotation. Why are you even looking at that bird?" He was sweating now, but trying not to show it. Maggie turned her gaze toward him. "Because tail 445 passed inspection under Crew Chief Simmons, and because tail 382 was signed off 2 weeks before my son crashed in it." She paused. "Your signature was on the log." Holloway's face turned gray. Those are just standard report." "I didn't," but the words fell flat. General Denton's tone shifted from measured to commanding. "Sergeant, pull the logbooks for tail 382, right now." Willis nodded, already typing. The screen lit up with digital records. Inspection notes, torque reports, part replacements. At the bottom of the report, one line glowed like a verdict. "Final sign-off, Major Brett Holloway, 2 weeks before the crash that killed Captain Noah Hayes." Maggie didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Holloway tried again. "I didn't know those repairs were standard," but nobody was listening now. Denton stepped back and took a breath. "Major Holloway," she said, "you are hereby relieved of duty, effective immediately." 2 military police stepped forward without a word. As they walked him out, Maggie looked back at the operations board. The storm was closer now, and there was still a mission to fly. Denton turned to her again. "What aircraft do you want?" "Tail 445, Maggie answered. "I've reviewed every bolt on it myself." Denton nodded once. "You're in command." "Colonel," she looked around. "Everyone. Give her what she needs." And just like that, the woman they had laughed at became the one they trusted with 60 lives. The sky was no longer the only thing full of storms. Thunder 7 wasn't just a call sign anymore. At Fairview Air Base, it had become a quiet rumor, traveling between command desks and hangar crews. No one said it aloud, but they all turned when Maggie walked by. She'd chosen tail number 445, the only C-17 that passed her inspection without compromise. She went over it herself, hands tracing each weld, like reading a language no one else remembered. Maggie had grounded the other aircraft without hesitation. Hairline fractures, tampered torque marks, and falsified signatures all under Holloway's watch. That plane wasn't going anywhere. General Denton didn't argue. When Maggie said no, people listened now, because the last time they didn't, a captain died. The new mission was just as urgent. One Abrams tank, the heaviest, fitted with battlefield comms for the stranded unit, would go first. It would be the proof of concept flight through the hurricane wall. If she succeeded, the corridor could be used for follow-on sorties. But this first run, it was the one that everyone expected to fail, and Maggie would fly it herself. She requested one co-pilot, not from rank, not from reputation, but someone who paid attention. She chose Lieutenant Claire Rodriguez. Claire was young, sharp, quiet. She had listened more than she'd spoken these past 2 days, and Maggie had noticed. "You ever flown weather like this?" Maggie asked as they prepared the flight deck. Rodriguez gave a half smile, nervous but ready. "Only in simulators, ma'am. But I studied your Kunar Ridge descent in flight school. They still teach it even though they say it's unofficial." Maggie didn't smile back, but her nod was enough. Legacy mattered less than what came next. The pre-flight checks were silent, efficient, surgical. Maggie adjusted the HUD overlays manually, disabling safety dampeners that would only fight her instincts. Rodriguez watched and followed. She wasn't teaching a lesson. She was surviving, and maybe showing this one pilot what survival looked like. Outside, the winds picked up to 80 knots. Ground crews tied down everything that wasn't metal. Lightning flashed without thunder, just a white crack across a black sky. The tank was locked in. Center of gravity logged. Fuel trimmed for climb and potential diversion. At 500, Thunder 7 requested clearance. Charleston Tower hesitated, but then the call came: Thunder 7 runway, 22 left. Cleared for departure. Godspeed. The wheels left the ground without a bump, just a smooth rise into violence. Rodriguez held her breath as the turbulence started slamming them sideways. But Maggie's hands didn't tighten. She let the gusts lift them, banking into each shift like she was riding current, not fighting it. Rodriguez's white knuckles eased on the yoke. At 14,000 feet, they hit the outer band. Winds howled. Visibility dropped to 100 feet in places. But Maggie flew by rhythm, not eyesight. She pulled flaps early, adjusted thrust to ride behind the wind pockets. It was like watching someone play music, with metal and sky. Rodriguez tried to follow every move. She memorized each call-out, each breath, each fingertip correction, because no one else had ever shown her this. "Don't force the plane," Maggie said over comms. "It wants to fly. You just have to remind it how." Rodriguez nodded, blinking back sweat. Ahead, the landing zone shimmered in rain, not a runway, just a strip of concrete between broken seawalls. Ground crews had cleared it barely an hour before, and now they stood out there, staring up like they were seeing a ghost. The descent began early. Maggie dropped altitude through a slip maneuver most would call reckless, but it lined up perfectly with a crosswind burst she'd mapped in her head 2 hours earlier. "Gear down," she said. Rodriguez hit the switch. Then silence, just the howling storm around them. The touchdown was impossible. Winds at 92 knots, but the wheels kissed the tarmac with almost no bounce. The tank crew ran to meet them. One man saluted without thinking. The others just stared. Inside the cargo bay, Maggie stayed calm but urgent. She recalculated weight shift as they pulled the Abrams on board. There were only minutes left. She turned to Rodriguez. "Use the headwind to lift early, then level at 300 feet and ride sheer until we can climb through the lull." Rodriguez nodded again, eyes wide. As they took off, the wind screamed louder than ever, but the aircraft responded. Maggie's hand on the yoke felt like part of the metal itself. Lightning arced past the right wingtip. Rain hammered the windshield like gravel. And Thunder 7 climbed through it all. Back in Charleston, the radar tracked their return. Controllers leaned in closer. A tech whispered, "She's coming back. She's actually coming back." Rodriguez called out airspeed. Maggie adjusted trim like clockwork. The descent vector lined up without a single correction. Thunder 7 hit the runway dead center, even as crosswinds howled across the field. They came to a full stop as the sun broke weakly through the clouds. Ground crews ran forward, whooping and clapping, but Maggie didn't react. She just looked at the horizon. Rodriguez touched her arm. "You changed everything today." Maggie didn't answer, but in her eyes something said, "Not yet. The real flight is next." The storm had only just begun to fade when Thunder 7 touched down at Fairview. Winds still roared across the runways, but the base stood frozen in a different silence. The kind that follows witnessing the impossible. General Denton was already there, waiting beyond the cordon. Her boots were soaked, her hair windswept, but her expression was unshaken. She stepped forward as Maggie descended the ramp, her face unreadable. "Colonel Hayes," she said carefully, "was that the aircraft your son flew before the crash?" Maggie didn't look away. She nodded once and spoke words that had waited far too long. "Yeah, and I believe it wasn't an accident." No one spoke for a moment. Then General Denton turned to her operations chief and said, "Secure all maintenance logs since last November, effective immediately." The storm behind the storm had begun, Holloway was relieved of command by lunchtime. He protested vaguely, then angrily, but no one was listening anymore. Security walked him out of Hangar Bravo as flight techs stood still in the corridors. No applause, no shouting, just quiet realization that trust had been broken. That afternoon, Maggie was asked to provide a full deposition. She carried no notes, no flash drives, just her hands and memory and the truth. She spoke in front of a room of officers, many still in disbelief, about torque tolerances, fatigue stress, and falsified inspection logs, and about the sound a mother never forgets her son's final transmission, cut by static. My son trusted this system. She said, voice even. He believed following procedure would keep him alive. Instead, it cost him everything. The tribunal sat still. No one moved for several seconds. Then the lead investigator looked down, and the verdict became inevitable. Holloway was court-martialed for gross negligence and falsification of records. The report that followed would reach the Pentagon within 48 hours, but Maggie was already elsewhere. She declined every interview request, politely turned down 2 major news networks. She wasn't looking for airtime. Instead, she sat down with 3 training officers at Fairview and opened a notebook. Inside were hand-drawn schematics, annotated flight paths, and storm mitigation protocols, techniques she'd never been allowed to publish until now. You want to prevent another crash, she asked. Start here and teach the next one better than they taught me. No one argued. 2 weeks later, Rodriguez knocked quietly on her door. She was holding a thick manila folder and a nervous smile. They're putting your descent pattern into doctrine. Thunder descent. It's real now. Maggie took the folder and flipped through. There it was: altitude vectors, wind thresholds, fuel burn estimates in turbulent climbs, everything she'd flown by instinct, finally transcribed. You're the one who'll teach it, Maggie said. Rodriguez blinked. I don't know if I'm ready. No one ever is. Maggie paused, then added, but you listened. That's more than most. Rodriguez nodded slowly, understanding more than she said. A month later, Maggie returned to Arlington National Cemetery. She wore her old leather jacket, the same one from her first day at Fairview. In her hand was a medal, not one she requested. She stopped at Plot 65, Section B. The headstone was clean, the grass cut low. It read Captain Noah Hayes. 1986-2022. He flew with honor. She knelt, placed the medal at the base of the stone, and whispered, They know now, son. There were no cameras, no fanfare. Just one mother, returning the weight she'd carried far too long. Behind her, Claire Rodriguez stood in quiet respect. She didn't interrupt, only stepped forward after Maggie rose. They've opened a new classroom back at base, she said, for storm protocols. Your name's on the door. Maggie didn't speak, but her eyes flickered with something close to peace. Back at Fairview, a photo now hung above that classroom's entry. It showed Maggie mid-flight, eyes sharp, rain streaked across the cockpit window. Above it, someone had painted 3 words in stencil, black: trust the air. Inside, cadets flipped through binders marked Thunder 7 protocols. The material wasn't standard issue, but no one cared. Because what Maggie had written didn't just teach procedures, it taught survival and reverence for the skies. Across the military, reforms began rolling out. Maintenance logs were now double audited. Flight crews given full inspection veto rights. It wasn't just about avoiding another crash. It was about earning back what had been lost. Trust. One night, General Denton held a small ceremony behind closed doors. She offered Maggie a service medal, a commendation, and a folded flag. Maggie declined all 3. I didn't fly for recognition, she said. I flew because no one else would, and I couldn't let it happen again. Denton only nodded and saluted her. The next day, a weathered envelope arrived at Rodriguez's bunk. Inside was a single note in Maggie's handwriting. Teach them what matters, and never let the silence win. She never saw Maggie again. Some said she moved to the mountains. Others said she went west. But every airbase kept a copy of her protocols, and every storm briefing began with her name. Thunder 7, the one who didn't just fly through the storm, but changed everything behind it. And in the skies above Virginia, the wind still whispered, but this time, they carried respect. Because legends don't vanish. They just wait until the world is finally ready to listen. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today, someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Grateful Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.